Welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast. I'm your host, Josh Holleran, and today we are joined by Paddy O'Kennedy. In today's episode, Paddy talks about his experience qualifying as a driving instructor and the company he used and why he chose them. He talks about the crossover from his background teaching people how to fly aircraft into how that translates to teaching people driving in the car and on the roads. He talks about his qualifying process and how he found it and some of the tips that he picked up that helped him get through it, and also how he's now using commentary driving with his learners in preparation for their driving test. If you're enjoying these episodes, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button. Also, make sure you hit the like and leave any thoughts that you've got down in the comments section. If you've got any questions for me, you can find me on my Facebook page or the Facebook group, and they're both available at Mirror's Signal Podcast. If you're currently watching the video version of this episode, you can also listen to the audio version, and that's available on YouTube Music. So hit the like button, make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any episodes as they go live, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Paddy, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. Thank you very much for joining me tonight and agreeing to have a chat. How are things going?
Things are busy. Lots of pupils want lessons. I think the last time I looked, I've got 22 active pupils with about 16 on the waiting list, and people happy to wait. So I suppose that's a good thing. I got a phone call from a lady the other day to say, can I take her on? I said, not until at least July. And she said, I'll wait. So I must be doing something right.
It is a crazy time for us at the minute, and the diary management is what I'm struggling with.
Me
I
too.
tried a waiting list and I kind of gave up on the waiting list. I'm like, look, just follow my Facebook page, and as soon as the space comes up, I'll post it on there because my admin's not my strong point.
You and me both. Yeah. And I one of the major problems I've had, and I've had it right from the start, is kind of learning to say no. Somebody comes up and gives you not a sub story, but says, like, this is why they need to pass for their job or the college or something, and you go, I really haven't got space, but I'll take you on. And then all of a sudden you look at your diary and think, I've just got too many people here, and just learning to say no is something I really struggled with at first, and now I'm just about managing to say no. I can't take you yet, but I'll be in touch.
So how long have you been qualified? Because that took me a while to get to grips with as well.
Not long. June, what are we now? 24, June 2021, I
Okay.
qualified. So coming up to up to 3 years. I did my basically a bit of backstory. Was in the Royal Air Force, was air crew as a navigator, so backseater, and flew jets and helicopters. Was an instructor on there, tactics and helicopter instructor. Did that for 25 years. Left, tried a couple of various things, and then thought, well, I was an okay instructor in the Air Force, so I'll give this a go. So did my part one, and then my part two and my part three in the space of about 6 months, soon after leaving the Air Force. So qualified in June 21. So just been here about 3 years. So still new. Every day's a school day. Still learning stuff, and I'm sure I'll carry on learning, and for the next 20 years, as I'm sure we all do.
That's an interesting backstory, and I'm sure we could make an episode out of that. Maybe we will one day. But what I'd be interested in from what you've mentioned there, you was an instructor on aircraft.
Yeah.
How did you find that from teaching a vehicle to translating those skills into what you're doing now as a driving instructor?
I think if you've got the ability to get a message across to somebody under stressful situations, driving is stressful, so is flying. If you have the ability to pass on knowledge, then you can take on stuff from a previous life. When I was instructing somebody onto the driving as well. The difference I found was that in the flying side of things, I was working with people that had already been filtered. They'd gone through a process. They were in the top probably 2% of all sort of applicants, and they kind of knew what they were doing because they'd already done the tests. They'd already done all of the sort of the joining procedures. So by the time they got to us, they were motivated. They really wanted to do it, and they were good at it. So I wouldn't say it made our job easy, but we had the right people to start with. On the driving side of things, well, the other thing was that everybody else in the air kind of knew what they were doing. They always followed the rules, or else they would have been there. So all of a sudden, I'm thrown into instructing on a car where everybody else just doesn't do what you're expecting them to do, as I'm sure we all know as instructors. But also the individuals themselves. A lot of them, some of them aren't particularly motivated. Maybe it's mum or dad that want them to do it. And I quickly learned that if somebody doesn't want to learn to drive, they're just not going to do it. It's very difficult to do if they're not, sort of accepting, what you want to give them. So, lots of lessons which we can pass across. But the main trouble I had was other road users. They didn't know what they were doing, and the pupils themselves. You had across the range from people that had never driven before, people that were naturally talented, people that just couldn't do it. I had one lady that I think she took 66 lessons or something to pass. So you've got to be a lot more flexible as a driving instructor than I was as a flying instructor.
How did you find that crossover?
I'll be honest, I found it kind of okay, really. I'd been instructing for a while. The techniques that we used was very similar. So when people said to me, when I came in ADI, they said, you're no longer an instructor. That's kind of old hat. We now do coaching, and we now do client-centered, stuff. And I said, yeah, great, not a problem. But we in the military, we've been kind of doing that for a while now. Instead of just telling them answers, we kind of draw it out of them. And I've been criticised in the past for sort of saying that. Somebody will answer me or ask me questions as we're going along, and you think, okay, well, yes, I can give you an answer, but if you go away and find the answer for me, we can discuss it during the next lesson, and you're going to learn a lot more rather than me just give you the answer. So, and I do a lot of that, and I've been criticised for that in the past. People go, "Oh, typical bloody military." Just give them the answer. No, if I can give them a hint of where to look, and I can say, okay, yes, I could answer that question for you, but I want you to go away and find out the answer, and then come back and tell me next lesson, and we'll discuss it. It sticks. So, those are the sort of things I brought across from my previous life. But the techniques are very much the similar. Rather than tell somebody what to do, and we used to call it sort of learning parrot fashion, which watch me do it and then you do it as well. Watch me do it, work out why I'm doing it, and then you do it, and then we'll discuss why, what's going on. So yeah, there was quite a lot of stuff I brought over from that previous life.
How did you find the qualifying process? You said you got it done from kind of part 1 to part 3 in 6 months. How did you find those 3 different tests?
Again, as aircrew, we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of checks. Every month there'd be a different check. Night flying, instrument flying, low level, high level, gunnery. You name it, we would have a different check. And then every year somebody would come to me and saying, right, you're out of date on your instrument flying, you're out of date on your night flying, so you need to go with an instructor or an examiner. So I was used to doing tests. I was used to doing multiple choice tests. I was used to doing tests under pressure. So to be honest, the aircrew background served me really rather well, and I passed first time on part 1. I got 1 fault, I think, on the part 2, and then I got an A grade on the part 3, and just went straight through it. So it was a really good sort of background grounding for me, having been exposed to constant testing, in the aircrew world.
How was your training? That sounds like you had a quite a good journey. Do you think that was your background, the training that you got through the process, or maybe a combination? What were your thoughts on the training?
It was a combination, really, because I chose very, very carefully. Well, I say chose very carefully. I went with a company. They were the only company actually that the Ministry of Defence accredited for a driving instructor training. No other company had sort of gone through the accreditation process, so this was the only one. So my choice wasn't particularly large, but I soon realised that when I started training with them, I saw exactly why they'd been accredited, because everything was in place, very, very sort of military orientated. Um, all the books were there, all the references were there. There was training folders. Um, there was a very structured training methodology. Everything was recorded. You could look back on it. You had a mentor that you could go to, and I found it very useful. So it was extremely useful for me to come straight from a sort of a military background into a very structured training process with everything. There were huge training folders. I've got sort of the big ones here, 4 huge binders, which you had to go through and follow this process. So it was something I enjoyed. It was something I was used to. And with this particular company, as I said, they were accredited to the military, so they'd already been set up to do it. And it went like clockwork, really. I had a great instructor, and it went very well.
Did you go down the PDI route before your part three?
I did, yeah. So I went onto a pink license, not because I wanted to start earning money or anything, because I strongly believe that it's a learn, not earn on a pink license. And I went on to that, started teaching, started getting paid for it, and then that's when the sort of the learning curve really started to go through the roof. When I wasn't with an instructor anymore, I was with kind of live pupils, doing live things, making live mistakes, and I was the only one there to do it. So if somebody was to ask me my advice, I would say go that route, go onto the pink license, do your 40 hours, find yourself a sponsor, make sure it's a responsible sponsor and one that's actually going to got your interests at heart and not just taking your money. And that's the way forward. It really, really worked for me. So by the time I came to do my part three, I was treating every single lesson as if it was a part three, in terms of the briefs, the debriefs, the questioning techniques. So when I came to do the part three, it was just like a normal lesson for me, and it went quite well.
How did you structure your time on your pink license? I've seen a few bits where people are struggling and trying to manage that time because it can be quite easy. We'll go back to at the beginning when we start, it's really difficult to say no. So as soon as you've got that PDI
Yeah,
license and you can fill your diary and work all the hours and,
yeah.
and make a half decent living, did you have much structure? Was you limiting the hours you was delivering lessons? How was
I,
that for you?
I absolutely was. I could have started at 8 o'clock in the morning. I could have finished at 8 o'clock at night as soon as sort of word got round that I was doing it. And I made a conscious decision to have at least an hour. It's just a personal preference for me to have at least 90 minutes between lessons. And I would do 4 lessons a day. Initially, it would start off as an hour, and then between that, I'd have 90 minutes. So at the end of that hour, I would drop the pupil off. I'd have a reflective lesson log, which we'd go over with the pupil. What went well, what didn't go well, what we can do better next time, what we actually going to do next time. And then when the pupil left, I would sit there for 90 minutes and just go through it on my head and go, right, what happened there? What could you have done differently? So I kind of did my own reflective lesson log, and I used the same form, but I did it for myself. I thought, right, what went well? What could you have done better? What issues could you have? And it was, I would do initially, I would do 4 hours a day, and that was it, with long gaps in between. And then as I got more confident, as I got further down the road, excuse me, I would maybe go on to 5 lessons. But as I said, if I wanted to, I could have done 8 in the morning until 8 at night, but that would have been earning rather than learning, because I wouldn't have had the time between the lessons to reflect and go, that went horribly wrong. And there were some lessons that went horribly wrong. And you just think, what did I do there? Why did I do that? What could I have done differently? Because that was really bad. And I learned more from those lessons than I ever did from the ones that went really, really well. So to answer your question, yes, it was very structured, and I forced myself not to take on too much, and I absolutely wanted that time between lessons to reflect on how that had gone.
I've heard that a lot, and that was a difference for me. I didn't go on a PDI license. I taught for free, failed my first part three, and passed my second one. But one of the biggest differences I found was that reflective log. And after each lesson, kind of going back through, figuring out what happened, and kind of being honest as well. If it was bad, why was it bad? Rather than just focusing on the good, because I don't think we learn too much when it goes well, like you've just said. But when it
Yeah,
goes wrong, we can figure out why and untie it. So I did find that was of a massive benefit to me as well, qualifying, although I didn't have a sponsor or a trainer. I done 40 hours and then off I went on my own to figure it all out. So it was
yeah.
interesting, and it's nice to hear that you managed to have some structure. And from the sounds of the process, you've done it all within 6 months and you passed with a good grade. So that reflecting and being strict with your diary, I expect must have had an impact when you did get to your part three and you've done all of your learning and not crammed in as many lessons as you could.
Yeah, I think you're right. I had made the mistakes. I When I went on to the part three, it was very quick from the time I did my part two to the time I got my pink license. So I can look back. I don't know how many lessons I'd actually done whilst on a pink license, but it wasn't a huge number. But the quality of those lessons was good in terms of learning. Not the quality of my instruction, but the quality of learning. So by the time I had done my part three, I had made my mistakes. I had gone through that reflective lesson long process, and I was pretty confident that I could give a lesson, a client-centered lesson, which is what they were looking for. So as I said, by the time I did my part three, I just gave a normal lesson. There was no, what am I going to give? Are we going to come onto it later on? I don't know. But the thing that annoys me, it doesn't annoy me, but I see a lot is I've got my part three coming up in 6 weeks and I'm going to do roundabouts. Well, hang on a minute. You don't even know what your pupil wants yet. Yeah, how can you say you're going to do roundabouts in 6 weeks? Do you know what your pupil? And then they say, well, I haven't chosen my pupil yet. Well, hang on a minute. Your pupil might not be ready for roundabouts. Just because you want to give that lesson doesn't mean to say, it's going. And I know you're already. And I say, well, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. You're not going to pass if your pupil isn't ready for roundabouts. You want to give it to them. I remember very clearly my mentor came down before my part three and gave me a mock part three test. And I had, in my mind, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And the pupil was ready for it. But as soon as my mentor sat in the back of the car, she fell apart and she started stalling. Now I had, what was I doing? I was doing the limit points. I was doing rural roads. So using limit points to judge speed into corners. That's what I wanted to do. But I had to get into the country to do it. And she kept stalling before I could get into the country. But because I had in my mind that I wanted to do limit points and that was going to be what I was going to teach, I completely ignored the fact that she was stalling all the way there. So I would help her and go, yeah, okay, that's great. Let's go and do rural roads. And what she needed for me to say was, right, this is why you're stalling. Let's forget rural roads for now, because you're stalling too much. And I didn't do it. My mentor said, why didn't you just address the issue that she had there and then? And I said, because I'd been working my butt off and I had a plan and I was going to stick to it. So flexibility was zero. Adapting the lesson was zero. And I completely lost it on my mock part three with my mentor. And he said, Paddy, that was terrible. I went, I know. So, I had made the mistakes. So by the time I came to my part three, the real one, I'd already been there, seen it, done it. I had the mistake t-shirt. because I'd been on the pink license and I'd gone through that structured process. I'd reflected on it, and I felt really quite confident when I turned up for my part 3.
So you had quite a good understanding of what was expected on the part 3 as well. From the sounds of that, the understanding going into it is what I missed as well on my first one. So how did you
Right.
find
Yeah,
that?
I did, but I did, do the Zoom calls with the trainers out there. I thought, well, I'm not going to go into this completely blind, so let's talk to some trainers out there. I did some Zoom calls with people to say, right, this is what you expected from a part 3, and then I thought, okay, I did that maybe a month, 6 weeks before my part 3, and then adapted the lessons running up to my part 3. I changed it as a result of the conversation I'd had with these trainers online, who were giving me top tips, and that did work out really rather well. So again, I would advise anybody, if they can, just get some help from somebody who's been there and who's seen it and done it before you do it.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of good trainers out there that can help people, especially looking back at what I done. I didn't do any of that initially for the
Right.
first part 3. And now I'm starting to see what's out there, and I know the amount of support that we have got access to, and it's easy to
Yeah,
get on. There's a lot of things out there, is utilizing it. And what was interesting, I think you said it was about a month to 6 weeks before your part 3. So you gave yourself time to implement these tips you were being given
I
rather than
did.
trying to do it 2 weeks before your part 3, and it leaves
I
little
did, and
time.
that was intentional. I made absolutely sure that I had enough time to change to change the way I did things if I was doing something wrong, and there was some stuff I really was doing wrong. I wanted to make sure I had enough time between the time I had the chat with the trainer to my part 3 to change things, and then about a week before, as part of the sort of the training package, a week before, I then went in another Zoom call with him just for sort of 20 minutes to say, right, is there any last minute things you want to talk about? So that's how it went. So yeah, I'm a big fan of continual professional development, and if it's out there, take advantage of it. There's some great people out there that can help you.
Absolutely. So if we can go back to your time flying, then
Sure.
we spoke a little bit about the instructing that you've done and how that translated to the instructing in the car. But are there things that maybe you've done while flying aircraft that you found have helped you or helped develop your learners on the road while driving a car?
Absolutely, 100%. And the thing that I'm really into at the moment, and my colleagues in the local area are going to get really boring with me, is commentary driving. And I'm a big fan of it. And I'll tell you what the background, and I'll tell you what reaction I'm getting to it now. In the air, unless you're a single seat pilot flying a Jaguar or a Harrier, I'm showing my age there now, or a Typhoon, then I was always part of a crew. So I never flew on my own. I was always part of a crew on most of the time on battlefield helicopters, on Pumas and Chinooks. And uh, right from the start, you're taught commentary flying, which is, I'm going to tell everybody what I'm thinking all the time, so that nobody's going to second guess what I'm going to do. So the last thing you really want on an approach at night to a field in Northern Ireland is for somebody to do something that you're not expecting them to do, because then that's when it goes horribly wrong. So all the time you are commentary driving, you're telling people what you're thinking, what your intentions are. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for that field. I'm going to go in from this direction. I've seen those wires. I've seen that tall tree. I'm going to go forward and right into the corner of that field. You know what I'm talking about with your military background. I'm going to drop troops there, and then I'm going to take off in this direction. I've seen that wire again. I've seen that pylon. There's that tall tree again. I'm going to go out in this direction. Is everybody happy? Yeah, we all know what you're going to do. Great. And then you go and do it. And then you stick with it. If you're going to change the plan, you say, right, I'm changing the plan for the following reasons. I don't know, there's a light on, the wind's in the wrong direction. So it's commentary. And it's instilled into us right from the start. Tell people what you're thinking, tell people what your intentions are, and they don't have to second guess. And It's something I did right the way through my career because you're part of a crew. If somebody was going to do something that you didn't know or you're unsure of, you would say to them, "What are you going to do here? What's your intentions?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, sorry, mate, I'm going to do this, this, and this." So that was something that was instilled into me as an instructor and as an operator for years and years. So now I teach my pupils commentary drive. I teach them to kind of think out loud. And I say to them, look, imagine how easy your driving test would be if I was sitting on the back seat telling you what to do. You know, you're coming up to a roundabout. Okay, let's go through the mirror signal maneuver procedure. So what are you going to do first? Right, check your mirrors. If I was going to tell you, right, now we're going to go left, what are you going to do? So if I was in the back seat of the test, it would be pretty easy. So what I teach them to do is kind of instruct themselves. They know the rules. They know when to, when to indicate, when not to indicate. So verbalize it. Talk yourself through the approach to the roundabout. Say to yourself, right, okay, I'm coming up to a roundabout. There it is, sort of, 500-600 meters ahead. Okay, I'm going to check my mirrors. Now I'm going, where am I going? Okay, I'm going straight on. So it's second exit. So I'm not going to signal, but I'm going to think about it. Okay, I've got 2 lanes. I'm going to get in the left-hand lane. Okay, approaching, everything's done. Right now I'm looking right. Okay, there's a car coming, so I'm going to slow down and I'm just going to go in behind it. Now, I've had really good feedback, really good feedback from examiners who say that they recognize my pupils because they do commentary driving, and the examiners like it because it takes away their kind of second guessing. Has he seen that car? Is he going to slow down? And I've seen them before, kind of hovering over the brakes, and you kind of think, well, if the pupil says, okay, coming up to the roundabout, going to slow down, got the car coming in on the roundabout already, so I'm going to slow down and go behind him. All of a sudden, the examiner goes, oh, they've seen it, and they don't have to hover over the brake anymore because the pupil has said, I can see the car. Or I've had them before where he wasn't commentary driving, he wasn't very good at it, he didn't like it, fine, but they were coming down the road and a car came to pull out, and he'd seen the car and he was going to brake, but he didn't mention it to the examiner, and the examiner put the brakes on. In my opinion, I was in the back. It was quite a nervous driver. The examiner, in my opinion, put the brakes on too soon. And he said, well, I'd seen the car and I was going to brake, but the examiner put it on first. Now, if he had been commentary driving and said, okay, I've got the car coming out of the drive, happy with that, I'm going to go on a little bit and then I'm going to slow down, then the examiner would have gone, great, he's seen the hazard, I don't have to operate the brakes, and he would have passed his test. As it turned out, he failed. So yes, to answer your question, and I've been going on about it a bit, commentary driving is what I really teach and what I really push for now, and it's got people out of a lot of trouble on their tests. It's not something everybody can do. It's not something everybody agrees with, but in my experience, and certainly from the feedback I've got from the examiner in 3 different test centers, they really like it because it takes away that their need to kind of second guess. Has he seen that car? Has he seen the hazard? Yes, he's just told me he's seen it and what they're going to do about it. And so that's the one thing I would bring from the flying world into the driving world is commentary driving.
How do your students find it? Do you introduce this as early as you can with the learning?
I do, yeah. I mean, some people, it's obvious they're never going to get it. They just, so I don't push it. In the first couple of lessons, you can tell if somebody just wants to drive. They might have anxiety issues. I've got one girl that just doesn't want to talk ever. I was with her for 2 hours last week and she never said a word to me. So it's difficult. Some people, it just doesn't work. In the air, it works with everybody because you're that kind of person. You're there because you've gone through that process. On the ground, it doesn't work with everybody. So no, I don't push it with everybody. If somebody's good at it and they want to do it, they can. If somebody doesn't want to, then fine. Some people are just shy and they can't do commentary driving. They can't think out loud. But if they can, I take advantage of it and I grab it and I develop it, and then I get them to use it. But if they don't want to use it, fine. It's up to them.
How do you find that helps with the learning process? We spoke about the advantages during the driving test. Have you found that it benefits the students with their own learning during the lessons as well?
Yeah, I do, because I say to them, what you're doing is you're instructing yourself. And what you need to do is so when we go away and do roundabouts, I always tell them the lesson before what we're going to do in the next lesson and give them some top tips and say, right, go away and do this on roundabouts. There's a book that the company that I'm franchised with, it's a driving skills book. There's a learning hub. There's videos that they can go away. So I always tell them what we're going to do in the next lesson, and they go away and do it. And I say, right, so talk yourself through it. So when we're coming to do a roundabout, you know what the rules are. You know, I test them on it and say, right, let's just have a chat about roundabouts. They then prove to me that they know all the rules. Um, so it's in your head. Now instruct yourself to do it. You know, rather than me tell you what to do, you tell yourself what to do because you know it. It's in your head because you've just shown it to me. So on the approach to a roundabout, on the approach to a junction, talk yourself through it. Tell exactly what you're going to do. Talk yourself through the mirror, signal, you know, position, speed, gear, and look and all that stuff. You know what to do. You know that has a drill. So talk yourself through it. And a lot of the times it works. Sometimes it doesn't. As I said, it depends on the person. But if the person wants to do it, it really helps their own learning as well. And they do it at home. And I say, just sit in a chair and just talk to yourself through it. Look at a roundabout. Look at a picture of a roundabout and just talk yourself through it. What would I do? What am I going to do with Paddy tomorrow when he says, you know, go across the roundabout, take the second exit? What's going to be going through my head? Verbalize it, talk it out loud, and I do find it really helps with the lesson process, with the exam process, test process.
Yeah, I've not used it quite as much or from the same angle that you use it. I obviously come from a military background, so not flying. I wasn't really trusted anywhere but the back of an aircraft. But we used it on the ground as well. So I've found that students that are doing things a bit too quick, if they can do it, it slows them down and gives them thinking time as well, which I
Yeah,
have used quite a bit just to try and bring it back a little bit, slow them down, get them talking through the process. But to use it for the driving test, I can certainly, listening to you, see the advantages. And I guess as they progress as independent drivers as well, it keeps them aware and looking, whether they keep commentating or not. It's that advanced awareness as well, isn't it? They're having to see it, process it, and comment on it, and it takes a lot of focus and attention.
yeah, it does, and it was the sort of the proof of the pudding is the other day I had a girl that wanted to do her test in her own car. Fine, not a problem. So I taught her. I started teaching her in my car, then we moved over to her car, and then she wanted to do the test in her car. Now, I didn't have to turn up at the test centre at all. She knew exactly where to go. Her mum took her, but as it was, by sheer coincidence, I turned up in the test centre just to give a bit of familiarisation to a pupil. And I saw her car and thought, oh, crumbs, she's just finished her test. Anyway, I parked up, having briefed the pupil I was with on the procedure for what she's going to do, what to expect when she does her test. And the examiner, or sorry, the pupil in her own car kind of waved at me and gave me the thumbs up. And then the examiner, as she was passing me to get back into the test centre, she looked at me, she said, that's one of yours, isn't it? And I said, yeah. How did you know? She said, because her commentary driving was brilliant. So, and that was in her own car. And then she had no idea that, and she just said, that's one of yours. She said her commentary driver was brilliant. And it turned out she got 0 faults. So, yeah, and the examiner said it was great. She said, I really like testing your pupils because the ones that do really well are the ones that do the commentary drive. And she said, makes my life a lot easier because I don't have to worry about, you know, have they seen the hazard? Because they told me they've seen it.
It's something I'm going to be putting into practice a little more with the
I
students that
would.
I can, because I've seen the benefits. I've not seen a huge link, but we all do it when we're working in teams, whatever it is we're doing,
Yeah.
and whatever task, because everyone needs to know what's going on. But it does get you looking and thinking. Mine was on the ground and patrolling, and you can just walk through an area and hope nothing happens. Or
Yeah.
you can, if something happens here, I'm going to do this. If something happens here, we're
Absolutely.
going to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
And then everyone knows. So when it does go wrong,
Absolutely.
we've
You
already
know
dealt with
exactly.
it.
You know exactly what everyone else is going to do. They know what you're going to do because you've told everybody, you've commentated, you said, if this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens, I'm going to do this. So when it does happen, boom, you just do it. And everyone knows what you're going to do. So, it's a military thing. Maybe it is a military thing. It's certainly a flying thing. It's part of a crew. Just tell everybody what you're going to do. So when it does go wrong, you know what to expect.
And it's that anticipation, isn't it? It's massive in driving when we're driving through either the country roads or the heavy kind of built up areas. If a car comes here, I'm going there. If this
Yeah,
happens, and
yeah,
I've found that's had a huge impact on my learners when they are talking about it, because it's one thing me prompting, what are you going to do if a van comes down the other
yes,
way? And
absolutely.
I think that's our preemptive teaching on what we should be doing and looking ahead and
Yeah,
planning for our students. But at some stage, we're handing the responsibility to them, and we don't really know their thinking unless they're talking us through it.
yeah. My favorite three words, and a couple of people mentioned this. She said she gave me a thank you card and she'd written this on it. My favorite three words are, "What's your plan?" If we're going, there's a particular one where we do it. There's a long hill where you're on the right hand side of the road all the way down. There's cars parked all the way down the left hand side of the road for probably half a mile, and all the way down the hill. Right, what's your plan? Right, I'm going to go in here. Great. Okay, that's behind you now. What's your plan? Okay, I'm going to go in here. If a car comes the other way, where are you going to go? What's your plan? What's your plan? And I just keep saying to them, tell me your plan. What is, talk to me aloud. And so they say, right, if a car comes around the corner, I'm going to go in the left-hand side. I'm going to go behind that red car. Great. So that goes now. What's your plan now? Okay, I'm now going to go behind the blue one. Great. So when it does happen, they just go behind the blue car. It just forces them to start thinking. But yeah, what's your plan is something I just say all the time. What's going to happen? Think about it. Look ahead. Anticipate. Plan. What is it? What are you going to do?
How do you find that affects you doing the job, implementing that?
Um, I think it makes it easy because once I've trained them to do it, I don't have to ask them as many questions. They ask themselves those questions, and I just sit there and go, "That was brilliant, great." And all the way down, the same hill day before yesterday, all the way down. She just talked herself all the way down the hill. She go, right, if there's a car coming the other way, I'm going to go in here. And then she said, right, that's behind me now. If another car comes behind, I'm going to go in here. And all the way down, I just said, do you realize I haven't asked you what your plan is? Because you were telling me all the way down the hill. And they go, yeah, that's right. So when it does happen, boom, in they go. They stop, and we go, and I say, right, okay, what traps could you fall into here? Oh, I could go too close to the car in front when I pull into a gap to let somebody else pass me. So yeah, so what are we going to do about that? Oh, I'm going to leave a car's lane. Yeah, brilliant. So it makes them think, and once they start thinking, they don't stop.
It's funny, isn't it? When we talk about this and the impact that it can have on our learners. But I mean, when I'm in an unfamiliar area, and I find myself now reflecting on my own driving quite a bit, but I'll talk myself through the lanes and the signs, and I'm like, right, I'm looking
Yeah, but
for
so
the
your commentary
A40.
driving, and you just said to me you don't do it. Well, you do. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
well that's it. And the more I think and I'm looking at my driving, we do it, and I expect a lot more people do it than they realize when they're in an
Yeah,
unfamiliar area. I'm looking for this road sign. Where is it? It's there. I need to get
absolutely.
into this lane. Because when we get lost, we turn the radio down so we can see better and talk ourselves through.
My wife said that to me today. We were looking for somewhere, and I turned the radio off, and she said, "What difference does that make?" I thought, "Oh yeah, you're right." Yeah. But going back to the commentary on my part two, I never shut up, and I said to the examiner right from the beginning, I said, "I'm going to be talking to myself all the way around here, I'm afraid, because I did my part two in an area that I just wasn't familiar with. I'd never been there before in my life." So I said to the examiner, "Look, I'm going to be talking all the way around here," and the examiner said, "Great." So and when I finished it, and again, I got just the one driving fault. She said, "Brilliant." She said, "You told me what you were thinking. You told me what your intentions were. You told me what your options were. You told me what your plan was, what you were going to do if this happened, and all the way around the part two, I never shut up."
So how did you find your part two? I think we've got a similar story with part twos. I taken it somewhere that we didn't know.
Yeah,
And we might as well talk about that a little bit for people that
cool.
are watching that have maybe got a part two coming up, because I
Yeah,
know people tend to be told, or at least advised, try and do it somewhere familiar. But we both
yeah.
took our tests at somewhere that we've never been to before, so completely unfamiliar. How did you find that?
Well, I wanted to get it done quick, and I live in mid Wales, and you were looking at least. I went on hold, for the part two. There were no tests available, so I went on hold after a month. Um, I thought, well, there's still nothing out there, so I went back into the system, and I can't remember exactly what I did, but I think there's a box that kind of says anywhere or somewhere, something like that. And I'm in mid Wales, and one came up in Pontefract. This was on the Thursday, and one came up in Pontefract. I didn't even know where Pontefract was, and it came up on the Monday. And I said to my wife, "What do you reckon?" And she said, "I'll just go for it." So I drove up there. I'd spoken to the local driving school, my mentor who happened to live there, and I said, I've never been to Pontefract before in my life. I've no idea anything about it. So can you give me some time just to show me around? So I arrived on a Sunday afternoon. I drove all around whatever I could. I started at the test centre and went in one direction. I started at the test centre, I then went another direction. So that I figured I'm a strong believer. If you can get the first 5 minutes of any test out of the way, then you're okay. Put it behind you because if you can get through the first 5 minutes without making a mistake, then you kind of settle into it. You relax, you get a little bit more confident. So I spent the Sunday afternoon just driving, and then the examiner turned up on. Sorry, the my instructor turned up on the Monday morning, and he said, "Right, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Right, spiral roundabouts." I said, "I live in the middle of Wales. The nearest motorway is an hour and a half away. The nearest dual carriageway is an hour away. The nearest spiral roundabout is literally from where I live about 2.5 hours away." And I said, "I'm having an absolute nightmare with this. I've been going around it on Sunday, and I just don't get it. So that's what I need to concentrate on." Now, a spiral roundabout is a spiral roundabout is a spiral roundabout. It doesn't matter if it's in Pontefract or Leeds or Leicester or where. So he then said, "Right, let's do spiral roundabouts if that's what you're worried about." So yeah, I wasn't prepared to wait, and I thought, you know what? If you can drive anywhere. So let's go and do it somewhere else and see how we do. Again, I had a bit of a structure. I went there and did my own plan on the Sunday afternoon. I met up with the instructor on the Monday morning. He showed me a couple of the potential sort of gotchas that were out there, the particular junctions which people get wrong, and I got it wrong. So then I did it right and kept doing it till I got it right. And then so by the time I did my part two, I think it was the next morning on the Tuesday. I had driven around it, but not a lot. So my advice is, if you can't find a part two where you live, go and do it somewhere else.
That's what I done. I qualified, I think, a similar time to you, and it was between COVID. I think it was a crazy time, and it's all blurred into one now. But I done very similar. I just took a test that I could, and it happened to be somewhere that I was like, I think that's near my parents. So I'll stay at their house and I'll drive around the day before. Very similar to yourself. I just drove out from a test center, 5 minutes in all directions.
Yeah.
Um, and then once I'd done that, I was like, cool, we're all right here. There was one junction. I'm like, that junction might catch me out on the test. It's on a hill, it's blind, it's onto a faster road. I'm like, that could be a bit of a nightmare when it's busy. And then we turned out of the test center, and I knew when we turned on this road, I'm like, oh, we're going to this junction. Brilliant. But I knew it was coming up. I knew the area. The issue was 2, 3 minutes after that, I didn't know anywhere, and I felt
Yeah.
more relaxed. Once I got through that, I was fine. Um, and to make it more of a challenge for me, the car that I was doing it in, I'd picked it up an hour before the part two, so I'd never driven the car before either. Um, but my thought was, I can drive any manual car, really. And yeah, I got lucky, got through it. But I think that preparation, like you mentioned, that first 5, 10 minutes of the test, I felt very comfortable leaving the test centre. I knew that they couldn't take me anywhere that I hadn't seen the day before for
Yeah,
those first few minutes. So that
yeah,
gave me confidence going in. And
yeah,
then once I got that first 5, 10 minutes out of the way, I was relaxed. I was driving. I didn't really talk to the examiner because I was nervous,
yeah.
but I got through it. I got more than one driver fault. I think I might have got three or two. Three, I think I got. So it's doable. And I think in the current climate, we need confidence in our own driving and maybe the willingness to travel a little bit if you can
Yeah,
afford to get there the day before.
yeah, put yourself out. I say to people, look, it's important. A part two test is important. It gets you, halfway to your part three. So even if you have to, except when you've never been before, even if you have to go and stay in a travel lodge or a Premier Inn for a couple of nights before your part two, make time, go there, stay a couple of nights in a local hotel, just drive around, get to know the place. It's so important that it's got to be worth doing that. It's got to be worth, 40, 50 quid a night in a local hotel just to get there and get to know the place. So if you can't find one where you are, go somewhere where there is one and structure it again. Get there a couple of days early and just drive. Because if you're good enough to do a part two, you're good enough to do a part two anyway.
Certainly. And I think when we get to a part two stage, we've got the knowledge. So, like you had with the spiral roundabouts, if you go to an area and there are some tricky junctions, you can either figure it out in the time that you've allotted for up there, because there are some tricky junctions and we might get through it safely, but is it the most efficient way for a
Yeah,
driving test?
yeah,
And then there's so many either trainers or just ADIs that are willing to help as well, like
yeah.
local ADIs. I know if someone was to post on a Swindon group, I'm an instructor, I've got a part two coming up, da da da. Can anyone help? I'm like,
Is
yeah,
that is that where you're based?
yeah, I'm Swindon. We'd have to go out of Chippenham for the part two.
So have you ever done the magic roundabout on a test? Do they do
Not
magic? I
on,
don't even know if they do tests on the magic roundabout.
I believe they can, but I think it's left and left. But there's another test centre in Swindon that gets used occasionally for L tests, and they can go on to the Magic Roundabout. So most of my students will go on, and it's
Do you take your students on it?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, you're
It's
a braver man than I am.
but I have to go on it at least. I must go on there about 4 times a day on the Magic Roundabout. And you know what? It's actually when you know it, and if you break it down, you never really do more than, do you know, we get our double mini roundabouts.
Yeah,
So you're never really doing more than 3 roundabouts. And generally it's only two.
but can you not go round a roundabout the wrong way?
Yeah. Yeah. When it's busy, you go around the outside. When it's quiet, you can go across the
Uh,
middle.
I'm
So
sure I was at Shrivenham, down
yep.
this, and I'm sure when I used to do the magic roundabout, I'm sure this was in the days way before I was a driving instructor. I'm sure I just used to close my eyes and go for it, and then open them when I was on the other side. It's
I think
chaos.
people still do that.
Yeah, it's total chaos. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're a braver man than I am, my friend, taking your people around there. I still don't understand it, and I think I should.
It is, it takes a lot of forward planning. And we can link this back to our lessons because I tend to say the same to all of my students is make a decision and it might be going the wrong way, but make a safe decision. So we might find on the Magic Roundabout, there are harder roundabouts in my opinion on Swindon, in Swindon than the Magic Roundabout because there are some that people just do what they want and they're higher speed roundabouts. But if they're unsure, just look for a lane, follow the lane, and that's going to save them after their driving test. If they're unsure, just go somewhere. Don't be holding traffic up, putting yourself in pressure. Just go where
Yeah,
it's safe, follow the lane, and generally there's going to be somewhere where you can turn around and get back on track. But
yeah,
yeah, the magic roundabout is it's all right when you do it every day. It becomes, as anything, a, little bit
yeah.
easier.
But well, you're a braver man than I am, my friend.
But maybe one day we'll have to get you over to Swindon. We'll get the camera out and we'll do the magic roundabout.
Yeah, have the camera on my face in the car. Just watch me going, what on earth is going on here? Yeah, I'd like that very much. Not.
There we go. We'll film a podcast from a car doing the magic roundabout. That's the next one. If
That's a
anyone's
good
watching
idea.
this,
That's a great idea. I'd be up for that. Yeah, let's do
if
it.
anyone's watching, I've got a 360 camera. You're welcome to Swindon and I'll take you over the magic roundabout. There we
Oh,
go.
I need to watch that because that would just be funny. If nobody's ever seen it before, it's extraordinary. But there you go.
But we will not discuss the magic roundabout much more. But there we go. There's a new podcast idea while we're driving. But what I'd like to get to now, if we can, I've got some tell me questions. Do you mind if we go through them?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Crack on.
Great. So the first one, can you tell me what car you would drive if it was the only car you could drive forever?
The only does it have to be practical?
It No, it can be any car you want,
I would
but on the premise that it's forever.
if it's forever, including maintenance and that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah, all of it.
I think I'm a big fan of a Land Rover Defender. I'm afraid, because if they go wrong, they were designed for farmers to fix. So I think I would go for either an early Land Rover, sort of a Mark II or something, or a really early Defender.
Nice. And the price of them these days are probably as expensive as as a
Yeah,
sports car, or that they're going up in value now, aren't they? I know a few
yeah,
friends ex-military, there's always someone with a Defender somewhere.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had one for years and sold it for considerably more than I bought for it. So yeah.
Oh, great answer. I like that. You've gone practical, taking all things into account instead of just throwing out a supercar.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it would be a Defender. Mind you,
Nice.
The Aston Martin DBS was close was a close second, but there you go.
I have had that previously, and I do question the cost of maintaining one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Land Rover, you can just get your local welder to fix your suspension on it.
Yeah, a lot of it can be fixed with a hammer and a screwdriver, I expect.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. So the next one, can you tell me if you could deliver a driving lesson to anyone, who would it be?
Who could do they have to be alive?
No, no, it could be anyone.
Um, if I had to deliver a driving lesson to, who would it be? I think it would be really interesting. I'm a big fan of Sterling Moss, the old racing driver. I read his autobiography. I was a big fan of him. I'm actually, a little bit too young to sort of appreciate what he did. But when they were driving motor racing cars like they were, rather than the things they're driving today, it was the driver in those days. And I think I'd like to give him a lesson, not because I would be teaching him stuff, but because I'd be listening to him do the commentary drive and then taking notes as he was doing it. So yeah, it would probably be Sterling Moss, the old racing driver. I think he'd be incredibly interesting, and I'd love him for him to teach me some stuff as well. Because in every lesson, as I'm sure you know, in every lesson, I always learn something from the pupil. And we always used to say, whenever we went flying, you will learn something every single time. And I was flying for 20 years. And I would come down after a sortie, and you think, crumbs, I hadn't thought about that before. So yeah, I think it would be Sterling Moss.
Nice. And on that learning every day, I've found once you get used to the questioning and finding out what people are thinking, and I guess from your commentary driving as well, I find some of the answers fascinating because the answers that I'm getting are not what I would have assumed if I
Yeah,
was just on instructor mode.
yeah,
When they're like, this was what I was thinking, I'm like, that makes sense. Let's
yeah,
figure out why and how we develop from
absolutely,
there.
yeah. And all of a sudden, you just go, I hadn't thought about
Yeah.
that, because everybody's different and everybody approaches problems in a different way. And the number of times you think, you're right, I'm now going to develop the way I teach this particular thing because of what you've just said. I hadn't even thought about that. So yeah, you're right.
So the next question, can you tell me the best advice you ever received?
The best advice I've ever received, I think it's um, if you don't understand something, just ask. Don't be afraid to. We've all sat there before in lectures. I'm sure you did when you joined the military, and you think, I don't understand that, but I'm too kind of embarrassed to admit that I don't understand it. Well, the chances are everybody else doesn't understand it either, and they're all saying exactly the same thing to you. So now I'm always the one who puts my hands up and goes, I don't understand that, I'm afraid. I might be stupid, but can you please explain it? And then everybody else there's a sigh of relief from everybody else in the room because they didn't understand it either. So yeah, I think if you don't understand something, ask, and if you still don't understand it, ask again.
Nice. I was always grateful of those people that had asked the question
Oh, you were one of
because
the ones. Yeah, I was always the one that asked the question, and you were always the one that went, "Thanks for asking that question, Paddy," because I didn't understand it
yeah,
either.
it did change when I started delivering the lectures. So,
Yeah,
as you probably know, my role as an instructor with regiment flight was delivering to everyone else in the Air Force. And as soon as I started delivering, and you see the blank faces, it's like ah. So whenever I was on the other end, then you start to see it is worth asking those questions because absolutely you're not the only one thinking it.
yeah. So were you the ones that used to take us into the gas chamber? Oh no, the respirator test facility. We were never allowed to call it a gas chamber. It was the respirator test facility, wasn't it? Where you were the ones that
Yes.
used to stand there and get us to take our mask off and then count to three and then put it back on again and have a drink of water and all the other stuff.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was me.
I hate you.
That's why I've saved it all the way until the end of this episode. So I've
Yeah,
got some
thanks for that. Or else
content before
I'd
you're
have
like, we're
switched.
not doing it.
I'd have switched off earlier.
So yeah, that was us. That was my job. But out of that, I'll now ask a question if I don't understand.
Yeah, there you go.
So what a great answer. The next one, can you tell me your favorite book?
Oh, easy. Lord of the Rings, without
Nice.
doubt. Yeah, absolutely. I've been reading. I must have read that 10, 15 times, and every time I read it, I find something different. So yeah, without doubt, 100% Lord of the Rings, and I've got so many copies of it in different versions. And yeah, 100% without even thinking.
Nice. The next one, can you tell me one message you would give to someone who's thinking of becoming a driving instructor?
Um, I think you've got to go with choose the right trainers, choose the right company. There are some companies out there. Do your research. I think is if I was to make it simple, do your research before you sign anything, because there are some good companies out there and there are some bad companies out there, and there's some companies that you're going to be signed on for. If you're not careful, if you sign on the dotted line, you're going to be with them for a long time. And like it or not, there are companies out there that are just interested in taking your money, and the level of training they give is doubtful to say the least. But there are some very, very good companies out there. So do your research, talk to people, go online, get recommendations, but just don't go for the first, one of the big boys just because they're the only ones you've heard of. There are some very, very good companies out there that will provide really good training for you and will be with you all the way through, which is what you want.
A great answer. Yeah, read that contract, like you've said, and understand what you're signing
Yeah,
because
because
it could be for a long time.
yeah, there are people out there, and we've all got Facebook groups. We go on, and somebody goes, "How do I get out of this? I'm paying £1,000 a month, and I'm going to do it for the next 2 years, and I'm not getting any students from them. They're not helping me. What do I do?" So yeah, do your research.
Nice answer. The next one, can you tell me one piece of advice you would give a student before they're going for their driving test?
Yeah, because I say it all the time. I say this isn't. Don't treat it as a test, because as soon as you treat it as a test, all those little prickles come out the back of your neck. It isn't a test. This is an opportunity for you to show the examiner how good you are at driving. And I say, remember, they're not after good drivers. They're after safe learners. So go in there. This isn't a test. Everything you're about to do. I always sort of sit down and brief people, and I say to them, a driving test, it's like an exam where you know exactly what the questions are going to be, and you know exactly what the answers are. And everything that you're going to be asked to do, you have done with me over and over and over again. And you must have done it to a suitable standard because I put you in for your test. I've said, yeah, you're ready for it. So go in there, and it's an opportunity to show the examiner exactly what you can do. It isn't a test. Imagine it's me in the driver's seat, not the examiner, and treat it as an opportunity because you're good enough to do your test, or else, I wouldn't have put you up for it. And then I say, do you trust me? And they go, of course I do. Well, there you go. I'm telling you, you're good enough to pass your test. And when you say the one piece of advice, the other one I always sort of just throw in there as well is, if you think you've made a mistake on your test, put it behind you. It isn't up to you whether it's a mistake. I've seen people before convinced in the first 5 minutes that they failed their test. One of them just maybe kissed the curb on a maneuver. But because they were in total control and they were moving so slowly, the examiner said, yeah, I'm not going to fail you for that because you just about kissed the curb. You were in total control. But because they touched the curb, they thought, that's it, I failed the test. And they then go, do you know what? I'm now going to treat it as an experience. I failed my test. Yeah, fine. They treat it as an experience. They go and do really well for the rest of the test. And the examiner says you passed. So yeah, those are the pieces of advice I give them every time.
Great advice. And the next one, can you tell me something you wish you were better at?
Does it be driving related?
No, it can be anything.
What do I think I was better at? I think I, this is a military thing. I wish I was more tolerant of people, that do or say stupid things. I wish I could just nod my head and go, yeah, okay, fine, and then kind of walk away. But I'm not. I should be more tolerant of, and I'm not talking pupils, I'm talking people in general. If somebody's, I don't suffer fools gladly, and I think I should. Just walk away rather than just, tell somebody the error of their ways or what I think is the error of their ways. So yeah, perhaps I should just be a little bit more accepting of people rather than what I am. But that's just a military thing. You know what it's like. If somebody's being an arse, you tell them they're an arse.
Yep. Or you don't stay around long enough to take a full career out of it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. But I mean, I did 30 years, so there you go. I mean, I must have been okay at it, but yeah, I think I'd like to be a little bit more tolerant. And I think as I'm getting older, I am getting more tolerant. I think it's an age thing as well. So, but yeah, that's, to answer your question, that's what it would be.
Nice. A great answer. And that's all of the tell me questions. Thank you very much for going through that. We
That's
are
all right.
through.
No problem.
But do you have any, no, another question, but this one's free reign. You can say whatever you want. Do you have any
Okay.
final messages that you'd like to share with people?
Again, on an instructor kind of thing.
Yeah,
I
instructor or kind of
Yeah,
thinking of becoming an instructor, just generally anything
I, I think it's a
industry
great.
related.
I think it's a great career. It's a great way forward. What I wanted to do, what I've hated to do, and again, we're going to go back to the military thing. I really enjoy days where I get out of bed not knowing what's going to happen. I hate it when I could never do a job that is mundane and where I'm doing the same thing every day, which is what attracted me to the military in the first place. And I think it's what attracted me to this job. You have no idea what's going to happen. Where you can get into a car and all of a sudden it's just so interesting. You've got to think on your feet. It's tiring. It's really tiring. To concentrate for that long. If you've got 6 hours, 7 hours of lessons, and you've got to concentrate the whole time, and you cannot, you just can't switch off for a second because you can guarantee that'll be the second where they steer you into the curb. So you've got to be very, very, very switched on all the time. So I think it's a great job if you're the sort of person that doesn't like mundane, mundane sort of living. It's certainly going to keep you on your feet. It's massively rewarding, and there's nothing more rewarding. I had a pupil that was diagnosed autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic, and ADHD. And when he passed his test and he came running over to me and gave me the world's biggest hug, because he'd failed it twice. Every other instructor he'd been to had given 1 or 2 lessons and then walked away and said, I can't do it. And then he came to me and I gave him a couple of lessons, and he said, don't give up on me. And I said, it ain't going to happen, mate. It just ain't going to happen. So he did 2 tests, failed them, basically because he was really into tractors. And every time he saw a tractor, that was it. He would go off on the history of the tractor and what horsepower it was and what connections you can put to it and the background to the company and where it was built, and that was it. You might as well just give up. So anyway, but as I said, it's so rewarding. When I saw his face when he passed his test, and he's now driving a Land Rover Discovery around and he's loving it. That was us. That was what you and I do every day. We take people on this journey of I've never driven a car before in my life, and now you're teaching them how to do it, and it's something you should be massively proud of. And if you're looking for a job with job satisfaction, I just don't think it comes any better than this. So if you're thinking about doing it, do it, but do your research, make sure you're trained well, make sure you're trained safely, and just go for it. It's great.
What a great place to end there on that. There's some good messages, and it is extremely rewarding. But thank you very much for your time tonight, Paddy.
You're welcome.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Yeah, keep up that commentary driving, eh?
I'm going to off to bottle feed some lambs. We had lambs last night, so there's a couple which need some help. So my wife's going to go and do it, and I'm just going to go and help her. But thanks very much for talking to me. I've enjoyed it, mate.
It's been great. Thank you very much.